The Houston Texans need to use that 25th overall pick that they have right now in the first round on either a wide receiver or an offensive lineman. That's how it's shaping up for me right now. And I know that stings defensive-minded head coach D'Amico Ryans' heart, but the Texans, despite adding players at wide receiver and along the offensive line, they still need help at wide receiver and along the offensive line. They still have to go out there and add to both of those spots. They were ahead on defense at the end of the year with how well the defense was playing. They're needing to play catch up on offense. So they've already added some bodies to both wide receiver and offensive line. When the season ended, that was the top of my needs list for the Houston Texans, and they've done a decent job throwing 7 new bodies at the position. Taking a look at it, at wide receiver, they traded for Christian Kirk from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Kirk should slide in nicely to the slot wide receiver spot. And then in free agency, they added 2 back of the wide receiver depth chart names in Justin Watson, and Braxton Berrios. Berrios, a little bit more special teams than wide receiver, but you kind of want that out of one of your 5-6 guys in the wide receiver depth chart. So you got some competition there at the back end of the wide receiver depth chart, and currently the number 2 receiving option for the Houston Texans. On the offensive line, we know about the names they shipped out. See you, Laramie Tunsil. Bye-bye, Kenyon Green. Adios. Don't let the door hit you to Shaq Mason. And the names they brought in are varying levels of intrigue. Cam Robinson over there at left tackle. He's only ever played left tackle in his career. And with the financial investment, 12 million plus bucks in him, he's going to get a good shot at playing left tackle for the Texans. They also brought in Laken Tomlinson, who's a bit of an Iron Man, just basically doesn't miss football games, but hasn't been super impressive since he left San Francisco a couple years ago. Jets fans will tell you he wasn't very good in New York, and Seahawks folks will tell you he wasn't very good for the Seattle Seahawks. But Laken Tomlinson is better at left guard than Kenyon Green was last year, or when Juice Scruggs had to go out there and play it. And then you added Ed Ingram if you're the Texans. With a trade, Ingram got benched in Minnesota last year. He's an option on the right side, and I do wonder if part of Ed Ingram not working out in Minnesota is if maybe he was in the wrong system. Maybe the Texans saw something that fits for the type of offense that they're going to have. And then Trent Brown, the veteran tackle who's played both left tackle and right tackle for parts of his career and for the New England Patriots when Nick Caley was there, the new offensive coordinator for the Texans, and Cole Popovich was there, the new offensive line coach for the Texans. So 7 bodies, but outside of Christian Kirk and Cam Robinson, none of these guys are guys that I can for sure tell you, yeah, the Texans got to start that guy. Yeah, they've done enough there. They don't need to worry about wide receiver or offensive lineman. So what I did was I took Daniel Jeremiah's top 50, his big board, so to speak, and I grabbed every player at wide receiver and offensive line off the top 50 for Daniel Jeremiah, and I put them here on a list for us to kind of just talk about and parse through and figure out if you got to go wide receiver or offensive lineman there at 25, what options could be available for the Houston Texans. Now, here's what I put together. 4 potential first-round wide receivers, and I put together numerous potential offensive linemen. What I didn't put on here were Will Campbell from LSU and Armand Membu from Missouri. I believe both those players will be well off the board by the time the Texans are picking. The rest of these names that you see here, they are absolutely, positively a potential pick at 25th overall. Now, Matthew Golden's getting a lot of love throughout the draft process. He's climbing boards. Might be tougher to see the Texas wide receiver there, but Golden should absolutely be in consideration at 25. Tetero McMillan from Arizona. He's gone the opposite way of Golden. He's going down while Golden is going up, but the Arizona wideout has been really good for the Wildcats the past 2 seasons. I really like him. I like him probably more than a lot of people in the draft process. He does replicate a little bit of what Nico Collins does without sort of that top-end Nico Collins potential. But, I mean, if you had Nico Collins and a poor man's Nico Collins along with Christian Kirk, you could move the ball through the air. Emeka Egbuka, we've talked about him on the channel before. He just feels sort of perfect for what the Texans are putting together here with the wide receiver room. He's not super fast, but fast enough. He blocks well. He can win against man coverage. He can win against zone coverage. He's one of the most productive wide receivers that Ohio State has put out. He's the top receiver or top receptions and receiving yards guy all time for the Buckeyes. Only 20 Buckeyes have scored more touchdowns than him in his time at the Ohio State University. And Luther Burden out of Missouri. Burden didn't have a amazing 2024 season, but he was awesome in 2023. And you look at these wide receivers, and you really need somebody opposite Nico Collins, and all these guys can play outside where Agbuka and Burden have a little bit more inside flexibility than those other guys. It's worth noting Christian Kirk's contract right now, only a 1-year deal. So having a guy that could eventually play a lot more slot for you is a big positive. Now, these wide receivers, all four of these guys would be about the 8th, 9th, 10th wide receiver in last year's wide receiver class. And some of these guys probably wouldn't even be in the top 12 for me if you smashed them together with last year's wide receiver class. Felt like the Texans probably should have snagged themselves a wide receiver last year, but ultimately they are left with a need this year and hopefully some youth. Now, wide receiver classes are better each and every year. This one just doesn't have as lot of pizzazz to it, which maybe lends itself to being a first-round situation. Now, let's look at these offensive linemen, because you really could use additional bodies at guard or a future at tackle. We mentioned those new offensive linemen, Ed Ingram, Cam Robinson, Trent Brown, and Laken Tomlinson. All of them 1-year situations, unless the Texans extend them. Robinson, Brown, and Tomlinson were all signed 1-year deals, and Ingram has 1 year left on his rookie contract. So think of the future as well as help yourself in the present. Now, Texas is Kelvin Banks Jr. He's a tackle to me. I don't know why people don't believe in Kelvin Banks Jr. All he did was walk in from day one, start at UT, kick everybody's butt, and play through an injury in 2024. Now, he could play guard right away for the Houston Texans and then eventually be a tackle for you after one of these veterans moves on. I don't know that you want to move a career left tackle down to guard, but if the Texans got an opportunity at a talent like that, use him in 2025, how you need to use him, and then plop him down there at a tackle spot in 2026, and hopefully be able to call it a day when it comes to the tackle situation. Tyler Booker from Alabama, if the Texans are going away from what they operated with last year, which is that zone running scheme, and they're going to add a little bit more power, try to get a little bit nasty up front, man, Booker would be a guy that fits perfectly. He's a mauler. You get into a phone booth with him, you're not coming out of that phone booth. He'd be in consideration at 25, though his athleticism does bother me a little bit. Josh Simmons is the tackle from The Ohio State University. I don't believe I would be anywhere close to drafting Simmons coming off of a serious knee injury like a patellar tendon tear, but I could certainly see, with options to play tackle in 2025, how the Texans could think, hey, if this guy needs a year to kind of get his feet under him, 2026 is when we could plop Simmons in there. People believe Simmons was a big-time prospect in this class as far as tackles before the significant knee injury. The knee injury worries me. Maybe it doesn't worry the Texans as much. Gray Zabel's the small school guy. North Dakota State University, dominated at the Senior Bowl, really good athleticism at the combine, and showcased he could compete with some of those big-time names that were at the Senior Bowl, had a fantastic Senior Bowl. He could play all three interior offensive line spots. So, hey, Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson, watch your back. Zabel can play center. Tomlinson, Ingram, whoever else is in the conversation at guard, Zabel could come in and fight them right away for any other spots along the offensive line. Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon could play a little tackle, could play a little guard for you. I don't love Connerly. He's kind of like a sneaks into the 25th pick, whereas he feels most appropriate like 30 to 40, like kind of right past the Texans' first-round range, kind of off the board before the Texans pick again. And I'm not in love with Connerly, but I could see where, hey, you need somebody that maybe can play tackle eventually or just settle in at guard. Connerly from Oregon makes sense. And then Donovan Jackson, probably not a first-rounder from Ohio State, played a little tackle, but is actually a guard for the Buckeyes for most of his career. And, well, he was really good as a guard for the Buckeyes. And Jackson, again, kind of in the Connolly range. 25 might be a little early, but probably not going to be around when you pick in the second round for the first time, or when you pick in the second round if you're the Texans for the first time. Hey, Nick Caserio moves around. You never know. So when I look at this, I look at the potential wide receivers, look at the potential offensive linemen, and then I also think about the depth of this offensive line class and how it feels a little bit deeper than some of these other classes. Feels like there should be options there in day 2, both in round 2 and round 3 for the Texans. The Texans get 3 cracks at day 2. You get 1 crack at day 1. And while I wouldn't love drafting, say, the 12th, 13th, 14th overall wide receiver in a 2-year span, that's not how teams look at things here when it comes to wide receivers. What's this class? Can these guys come in and help? And I just like these wide receivers at 25 more than I like an offensive lineman at 25 right now. And you got to get somebody long-term in that wide receiver room. While the Texans don't have a ton of long-term options along the offensive line, if Juice Scruggs and Jarrett Patterson, along with Blake Fisher, all turned out to be players you could rely on in 2025 and beyond, that would solidify 2, maybe 3 spots for you. Only Nico Collins is a guy that you're relying on beyond 2025, unless something changes with Christian Kirk. Everybody else in that wide receiver room, 2025 is going to be their opportunity, and then who knows? After that, I'd like to get a running mate for Nico Collins, start building that rapport, getting things going in that wide receiver room as the Texans think long-term about investing in this offense with C.J. Stroud, solidifying that offensive line. You got 3 selections currently on day 2. There should be options there in round 2. Heck, maybe even Connolly and Jackson, as we talked about those 2 players slipping down the board. Guards like Jonah Savanaia from Arizona should be available in the second round. Tate Ratledge from Georgia should be available. So with all that, I officially declare that should Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Tetero McMillan, or maybe even Luther Burden be available at 25, I like them more than drafting one of these offensive linemen at 25 overall. Now, like a wrestling match that's coming to your town, card subject to change, opinion subject to change as things start to shake out. But I got to imagine a lot of those roster moves and machinations probably pretty done for the Texans until the draft gets here. They could change things certainly after the draft if they don't get this position or that position. Maybe there's veterans to go out there and chase and find, but I like wide receiver at 25th overall. What say you? You down for wide receiver 25th overall? You want one of the big uglies at 25th overall. I say big uglies affectionately because they're very important to what the Texans need to do in the upcoming season. Maybe you're feeling bad for D'Amico Ryans and you want to get him a defensive player. Let me know in the comment section down below, wide receiver or offensive lineman for the Texans in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. There we go. Appreciate you watching the video. Don't forget to check out SNL with myself and Landry Locker. It's a totally separate channel that has daily live shows with myself and Landry Locker from the locker room. 4 p.m. is when we usually go. Usually slight adjustments if there's travel or this or that. But 4 p.m. weekdays, SNL. The link to that is in the description down below. Appreciate you watching the videos. I already said that. Thank you for watching. That's the same thing as appreciate you watching the videos. Hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we talk Texans and the 2025 NFL Draft again soon.